Welcome to Job Tales, the podcast where you find dozens of interviews and learn about your potential future favorite job. My guest today is John Bosley, Aviation Safety Inspector. In the next 25 minutes, you will learn about John's work at the Federal Aviation Administration, the future of aviation, and some humanitarian work related to the field. John Bosley is with me. Thank you very much for being at such a short notice, a guest at my podcast. I am very excited about your job because it's very close to my job. So can you tell in a nutshell, what is your job and what you do?
Hello, I'm an Aviation Safety Inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration. This is actually a pinnacle of my aviation career after 21 years in the Army, all rotorcraft, and then general aviation maintenance and including Sikorsky Helicopter Corporation. So currently with the Federal Aviation Administration, I'm a safety inspector. My duties could include helping people establish a flight school if they wanted to come up with a flight school or a repair station. Also, I have to investigate accidents, which are very rare, which is good because we have a very good safety record. So accidents are rare, but that sometimes when the phone rings, that's what I have to do. I investigate complaints from the public. If the public ever has any complaints about low flying aircraft, I might have to get involved in that. And then some very administrative tasks like name changes on license, hotline complaints, just some things that you wouldn't even expect that I would have to do, but it comes with the territory. But every day I'm at, whatever the taxpayer wants me to do at that time when the phone rings at the Federal Aviation Administration, myself and a team, we get it done. And but a lot of surveillance, just making sure that everyone in aviation is doing the job according with the rules. And they do. And I'm very glad.
So if I understand correctly, you're both on site and on call. Is that right?
Yes. So I go to an office every day, but when I'm on accident standby, that's from the house. So when the phone could ring and unfortunately I might have to go to an accident scene.
Okay. And you said that it's a pinnacle of a career. So what comes before this?
So it's a pinnacle. Most people that join the Federal Aviation Administration, they probably already have 15 years of, they could be a charter pilot with 15 years or me with a maintenance background. Because when you join the Federal Aviation Administration, you need to have a really good experience level of what's really going right and wrong with aviation. It wouldn't be fair to join the Federal Aviation Administration if you didn't have any experience, because you wouldn't have anything to know what right looks like. So typically, if you're coming into the agency from a maintenance background, you're going to start off as a mechanic somewhere. You're going to be a regular mechanic that came from a school, and then you get your license and you're going to go work for the airlines or general aviation. Your career, you're going to progress. You're going to be a regular mechanic, and then you're going to become an inspector, and you might even be a low-level manager. So you're just going to do step by step, increased responsibilities, increased authority. And then you're going to decide, interesting, I wonder what it's like working from the other side, the government side. And people make a decision to leave what they're comfortable at, and they go into the agency. And then they realize that there's so much they didn't even know. And you just start learning, starting with day one.
What is the most interesting thing you've learned once you stepped into FAA?
So you immediately learn that there's a lot of rules that you didn't know existed.
Okay.
You're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that was a rule, because there's so many rules and it's impossible to memorize them all. But you also realize that aviation is what's called self-regulated. There's only a very few inspectors, but there's thousands of airmen, pilots, businesses. So the agency, they are demanding that the business, the aviators, that they're called self-regulated, that they do the right thing even when no one's watching. And it does work that way. It's all checks and balances. Most people do the right thing all the time, and that's expected, and that helps the whole process go smoothly. So you learn that it's all teamwork in aviation.
So in order to come to this point in your life, in your professional life, what did you have to study prior to this?
So if you want to become an airframe and power plant mechanic, that's the license required in the United States. You have to have 30 months experience on aircraft, or you can go to a technical school, and they're called Part 147 schools. So you have two paths. You can either get the experience working at an airport, your friend's garage, hangar. You get the 30 months experience, and then you're allowed to take the test. Or you go to a school, and then it's concentrated, of course, like 2 semesters. And then once you graduate from the school, you're allowed to take the test. But regardless of what path you take, you're both going to end up taking the airframe and power plant test. And that consists of 3 written tests, general, airframe, and power plant, and then an oral and practical with a designated mechanic examiner. And once you're licensed, we call it the license to learn, because you're just going to take that license, you're going to go to your next employer, and you're still just going to constantly learn.
Okay. Yeah, fascinating. Is there some specific skills, be it soft or hard skills, that you would say are necessary for your line of work?
Yes. So now I have applicants come into the office now, and they say, hey, I want to become a airframe and power plant mechanic. And they're 18 or 19 years old. And I said, okay, that's great that you want to become a certificated mechanic. But as technology increases, you need to also have a specialty. So, okay, you want to be a licensed helicopter aircraft mechanic, but you should also consider becoming an expert with avionics or, electrical, because employers, they want to get the most they can out of their money. So if they can hire you and you have your license, great. But if you have your license and you have a good background with avionics, it's higher probability that you're going to get hired versus someone with just a license that is scared of electricity or, oh, I don't like touching radios, because the employer is going to make a decision and they're going to hire the person that has the avionics background. Also, as drone technology is increasing, young people should take an interest now in drone technology. We're advancing into electric aircraft also. So think about aircraft are going to progress, get out of the mindset of gas operated engines and all. It's going to, within the next few decades, that's going to be in the museum. So always think ahead. So yes.
How did you actually get your first job?
So when I went to a technical school in Maryland for plumbing, of all things. For plumbing, I didn't even know anything about aviation. And the Army recruiter talked me into joining the Army, and my scores were high enough when I did my test. He's like, you know what? We need people in aviation. And I was like, aviation? I don't know anything about it. But of course, they're recruiters and they're professional at convincing people to take a very good path. So I listened to the Army recruiter, and next thing I know, I'm working on Bell Jet Rangers in the Army. We just didn't call them Bell Jet Rangers, Bell 206. And 21 years of helicopters in the Army. So wow. It was all based off of the recruiter putting me on the right path.
Amazing. So 21 years, and then the switch to FAA?
No. So then after I retired in 2009 from the Army, it was a recession in the United States, maybe worldwide. So what I did, I went right back to Iraq and I contracted. I was a contractor in Iraq, and I worked on Cessna Skymaster aircraft, the push-pull aircraft.
Okay.
And that was my introduction into fixed-wing aircraft, because I was all rotorcraft in the Army. So that was my introduction to fixed-wing aircraft, and it had tail numbers. So that was my path into, I'd say, civil aviation. After that contract ended, my friend has a repair station for Cirrus aircraft in Florida, and I helped him. Had beautiful, beautiful aircraft, air conditioning. We would take our shoes off. This new experience. So that at that airport in Florida, Sikorsky Helicopter has an academy there teaching like LA County Fire, San Diego Fire. And that was my springboard into Sikorsky. So I did 5 years with Sikorsky Helicopter Company at their academy, helping them teach new operators how to use their helicopters. fast forward after that 5 years, a wonderful experience with some great folks. It was the right time to apply for the FAA, and here I am, a handful of years later. So
4 years later, okay.
Yeah, so it was just a great opportunity. It seemed like always searching for a little bit more responsibility, accountability, and here I am.
Can you describe typical day of work for you?
Oh, yeah. So a typical day of work as an aviation safety inspector, you already know what you're basically going to do for the next 2 years, because it's called a surveillance plan. You know that if you have 10 flight schools and you have some repair stations, they're planned out for the next 2 years. So every January you're going to go to this flight school, ABC flight school, and then every December you go to this other repair station that works on landing gear. So the calendar is it's already planned out for 2 years. You have a 2-year plan. However, in between there, we call it on demand. That's when you do everything else that's not planned. So the phone rings and someone's like, hey, I need to change my nationality on my license. You're like, oh, interesting. And you tell them what they need. So I need the forms from the consulate or whatever. You tell them what they need and they show up. So I would say half our day is scheduled and then half the day is on demand. And it's a very good plan that, Big FAA they've been doing this for so long that they have it really organized. And then of course, every couple weeks out of a year, you'll be on accident standby. You're waiting for the phone to ring, and that's from your house where you have to do the accidents. And then we have some fun things, some like the Huntington Beach Air Show is coming up in the summer. So those are times when you're at an air show all weekend. You're just representing the FAA and you're making sure everyone does everything right. So representing FAA at expos and exhibitions. Okay. Yes.
That's very fun indeed. Are there any interesting anecdotes, fun stories that you can think of that happened during one of those unexpected calls?
Let's see. Well, it's always fun to go represent the company, the agency at air shows, because you're the face of the FAA. So we're at the Huntington Beach Air Show and everyone wants to come up and they all have the same interesting questions for you. Like, what if I take off with this drone right now and I fly this drone? And then you have to kindly and gently tell them, that's a terrible idea today. It's not a good idea any day, but today is probably the worst day. But so you're the face of the agency, but you're not like a hammer. You're not just hitting people on the head. You're also showing, hey, the agency we're out here. We have the best interest, your best interest, the safety of the air crews. So I would just say that dealing with the public face to face and showing them that, hey, we're just people. I was a helicopter mechanic. Now I'm working for the agency. It's just really nice to show them that we're just regular folks also that just decided to take this path. And I really enjoy it. And I really enjoy when someone calls and I answer the phone and they're like, hey, I'm calling from France. True story. Calling from France. And I'm like, interesting. Why are you? So you're calling where I work in California. They're like, yes, I was trying to get all the other offices, but you answered and you're a person. You're not a computer. I'm like, good. How may I help you? And it's so nice to really just run with it. So okay, I own this now. How may I help you? And they're like, oh, it's a nationality change. I'm like, all right, well, here's what you need. Let's make this happen. So it's really a good job to be that good government employee and show the people that what they're getting for their tax money also.
Has there been some tough situations where you had to be more firm, or there were maybe more serious events or maybe accidents that you had to be witnessing?
Yes, there are, but we always have, it's called dignity and respect. If you ever had to go to an accident and the cameras, the TV crews are there. Fortunately, we go to a school for accident investigation and we learn how to speak to the media. We learn how to do interviews with witnesses, but it's dignity and respect, because it would look so bad for if the family's watching the news and you as the inspector, you're on TV and you're smiling for some reason.
Right.
So you have to realize that, okay, this job is very serious from as soon as you show up to an accident until you leave, do everything proper and always be very serious about it. So yeah, there's some sad days like that. And investigations, we're very, very fair. The FAA is not trying to hurt anyone because our employees are also pilots. Why would we want to hinder someone, because we don't want to lose our license either. So, so it's very fair.
So I'm thinking for someone who would like to work at FAA, does he or she need to go, a similar path that you took? Or could, for instance, this person come out of, say, civil aviation, flight school and then work at FAA?
So there's a few jobs out with the agency that don't require you to have a license. So I have an A&P license, but there's other jobs in the agency that they're not required. So you could be an aviation safety assistant, or where you can still get into the agency, and you're in the agency, you're still dealing with the public. It's a really interesting foot in the door, but you're not going to be a aviation safety inspector like me without the license. It's just one little requirement. So there are other ways to get into the agency, but my specific one, you have to have the license, which that's why most people progress from being a mechanic somewhere, or they're a pilot, and then they just progress into my job. But there are other avenues where you don't have to have the license to join the agency.
You were telling me before the interview started that you've traveled a lot also through your previous job. If I think of a similar, the equivalent of FAA in Europe, which is EASA, are there similarities in the job that you do, or would you have to learn new rules and regulations in order to do your job in Europe?
Okay, so interesting. EASA and the FAA, of course, we have the same goal. Safety, just safety. I've never dealt with anyone from EASA in person, but I've spoken to them on the phone and email. So each one has the same desire for safety. I don't know the actual criteria to apply for the jobs with EASA. However, it's headquartered in Germany, I believe. The headquarters there. So you can go online and see where they're looking for, what type of employees they're looking for. But I don't know their criteria. I apologize.
Okay. So you would not be able to work at EASA tomorrow, for example?
No, and I definitely can't, because there's going to be criteria about, I think, residency in there. So no, an FAA employee from the United States, I'm not going to work for EASA.
In Europe, okay.
I probably also would not know their rules enough either.
Right.
So no, I don't see that being a transition. But people that are in Europe working there and that's their whole mind is around those rules, they would have an easier way of getting in, but I would not be able to.
And in terms of safety and authorizations, worldwide, do these agencies in the different continents talk to each other and try to find a streamlined regulation? Yes.
They're called bilateral safety agreements. So yes, the FAA, South Africa, the Philippines, there's countries where we have bilateral agreements where why would you make someone reinvent the wheel to how they're going to fix a helicopter somewhere? No, let's just say our rules, each agency, their rules are all about safety. Let's just look at the rules, say, okay, yes, we all agree that they're all the same. They're all basically safety oriented, and let's have an agreement where we're going to accept each other's rules.
Okay.
Also Canada. So there's an agreement already where we accept their data, that how they're going to fix something, and vice versa. Okay. Because it would be impossible to try to keep up them with what every country had if we didn't have these bilateral safety agreements.
Right. Yes. And it's very important, especially for the future of aviation. And you were mentioning briefly, the electric aviation and the passenger drones or cargo drones. How do you see that panning out in the future?
It's coming regardless of your opinion, you cannot stop it. It is happening, and anyone that's thinking about getting aviation needs to already know that, regardless of your opinion about it, reciprocating engines and all that's going to be in the past. It's going to go electric. Drones are coming, like the Jetsons. Remember the cartoon, the Jetsons? You know about that? Oh, okay. So it's like the Uber, these electric aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing. It is going to happen. You're going to go to an airport, a small airport. You're going to get in your vertical takeoff and landing, like Uber aircraft, and it's going to take you to a larger airport, and it's going to vertical takeoff and landing. That is happening, and eventually it's going to be autonomous. I'm ready to do it. Yeah. I have confidence in this, that I'll sit in there and let it, it takes off with no pilot, and it's happening. You're going to have confidence. You're trusting software, but they go all the way to the International Space Station, right? 19 hours, and that's autonomous. Right. They're no longer, they don't steer that thing. So you have to have confidence in the
system, and it will be FAA that will define the rules on how to manage.
It's already happening. Yes,
it's already happening.
So there's already rules. 14 CFR 107. I think that's for the drones. There's already rules where the rules for safety, so that how high can a drone be off of a building, like the 400 feet above the highest point, for safety, so that the worst thing that could happen, we don't want a drone hitting a helicopter, right, breaking out the window. So these rules are already in work, and if there was ever a need to modify them, the FAA would make that happen also. Okay. So yes, it's happening. There are people right now, they're dedicated to rulemaking. And that's their lane. Not my lane, but that's theirs.
Okay. How many positions are there like yours at FAA in the United States,
I don't know.
Okay.
I apologize. I don't, but there are thousands of FAA employees. There's thousands, but that's a small number compared to the thousands upon thousands of pilots
right,
and businesses, but there's thousands of us.
Okay, excellent. And what do you see for yourself in the future?
So I retired from the Army, healthy, thank God, only one injury in Iraq. So I'm learning everything I can with this job, but I see myself going into helping mission aviation. So folks that are out there doing really good work with aircraft on the mission field. So that's what I would like to do, where all the things I've learned throughout all this time, how can I put those to work in a good way? And so you have, can I mention company names?
Yeah, sure.
So you have like Samaritan's Purse. Samaritan's Purse, as soon as there's a hurricane, earthquake, the Ukraine, things like that, that organization loads up their aircraft and they're flying somewhere safe, and then they're kicking out the humanitarian aid. So helping an organization like that who's doing the greater good is kind of that's one of my goals. So right now I'm finishing my master's degree in aeronautics, and in the future I'm looking at doing some volunteer work for some good organizations.
That's very honorable, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast, and super interesting, and I'm sure that it's been helpful and informative.
Thank you.
Many more jobs coming up on Job Tales. Stay tuned and spread the word. I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Just tap Job Tales Podcast, all one word. See you next week.